Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After the news you need to know about, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. Lots of weird stories on today's show that I'm very excited, and obviously OTAs has been upon us, and I'm excited to talk about that too. But this first news story is the most annoying one, so we're going to start with this one. I know everybody's sick of hearing about it, and I'm sick of reading about it, and I'm sick of hearing about it too. And I think we've talked about it once every show. So let's start with this. This first news story comes from Dolphins Nation / ESPN.com. This quote comes from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler. He says, quote, I'm told Dalvin Cook is down in South Florida working out. He's cleared off that torn labrum that had surgery this offseason, so he's good to go and sort of awaiting his fate. I'm told the Vikings are willing to hold on to his $14 million cap hit for now until they figure out what to do. They want to do right by the player, but teams I've talked to believe that he'll be in a new uniform, whether it's trade or release. And there should be a market for his services. Now, I'm told that he loves Minnesota, but he's open to a fresh start, and Miami could be an intriguing option. They've been linked to Cook in recent months. So this is just another reporter who has reported on the fact that he has been linked to Miami. We've talked about it before, but they tried to trade for him, and it didn't work. Obviously, the deal fell through. Nothing's going to happen until after June 1st. We know that because of the cap space issue. It's interesting that he brought up trade. I don't think anybody's going to trade for him. Similar to the DeAndre Hopkins situation. Nobody wants to take a $14 million cap hit. You know, there were some other weird stories how Dalvin was willing to take a pay cut to stay in Minnesota. That was circulating over the week. So there's some interesting stuff there. Who knows if he'll be a Dolphin or not? I mean, probably less than a 50% chance, maybe. I also didn't think Jalen Ramsey would be a Dolphin either. So, maybe that, who knows at this point. It would be nice to have him. We've talked about why. He's a great scheme fit. He would be another playmaker on the team. And I think he would really help and complement the other two as a consistent guy who can come in and make plays. One thing I will say before we move on about him, and I don't think this is something we haven't touched on, is $14 million is a lot from a running back who is, I would say, probably, in more of the sunset of his career. I wouldn't say he's still in his prime, but he has had injury issues, and, this team has a few key players that have had injury issues in the past. So I feel like that the money for him, if it was a trade, is a little bit too much because of that. And they did just pick A-Chain, Devon A-Chain from A&M, obviously, and he's looked good in OTA so far, which we're about to talk about. So I would say if they can just get a deal done at a reasonable price, it would be a good move. So let's move on. This comes from Bleacher Report, and a bunch of other sources reported on this earlier this week. It's one of the weirder stories, and when I heard this and read this, I just thought it was strange. Dolphins, again, this comes from Bleacher Report. Dolphins are trying to transition Andrew Van Ginkel to middle linebacker, inside linebacker, in a 3-4 system, which is very interesting. One of the things I don't understand why they did this or are trying to do this. One of the things I will say is he has a lot of promise on the edge. I think he really fits the scheme. And the one thing that makes me scratch my head the most about this whole thing is that the one thing that Andrew Van Ginkel sucks at is covering and coverage. Like, he's really bad at it. He was by far, out of all of the outside linebackers on the team, the worst at it. I question his ability to get to sideline as a middle linebacker for sure. And, he's a phenomenal run defender when he was playing outside linebacker. That's a completely different position than, especially stopping the run, going from middle linebacker to outside linebacker, two different worlds. And the thing that he struggled with the most since he's been a Dolphin is making plays in space. So I'm not really sure why they looked at the film and they saw that this could be a possibility. To me, this is actually like kind of mind-boggling. Like, I don't understand. I would never in a million, trillion, infinite times ever ever think about moving Andrew Van Ginkel to middle linebacker. I was happy that we re-signed him. Obviously, he did. He made, he had he visited with New England and a few other teams, and I was happy that we brought him back because he would be a phenomenal, rotational player on the edge, and he is a good run defender, and he's a good pass rusher. But as a middle linebacker, I just don't see it. I just don't understand it. I just disagree with it, and we'll see. Now, there's much been made over the inside linebacker position on this team that I don't really understand. If you look at the roster, and we'll talk about this here in a second. But if you look at the roster, David Long, obviously Jerome Baker, you have Duke Riley. I know a lot of people like Aubrey Miller as well, from Jackson State as the undrafted rookie. I'm not a big fan of his, but, I just don't understand why Van Ginkel is making that transition. Maybe they feel that they have enough depth at that position. I don't know. But we'll see Vic Fangio knows more about football than I ever will, so we'll see. I just didn't see Van Ginkel's going to have to get more athletic, especially in space. He just doesn't move well in space. Like, I don't know. I can't see it. We'll see what happens. Oh, and I forgot about Channing Tindall, too. Like, I just don't understand why I feel like that's an overblown thing about the Dolphins roster. The middle linebacker position has enough depth on it already. You got two really good starters. You're probably going to be in nickel defense anyway, most of the time in a Fangio system. So, and you might even play with three safeties most of the time. So I don't know. I just don't think this is a good idea, in my opinion. And I disagree with that. And we're actually going to talk about that more, about the middle linebacker depth. But moving on from that weird out of left field story that Van Ginkel is going to be trying a middle linebacker, we go into this next one. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. This is regarding Austin Jackson. Austin Jackson is back at work for the Dolphins. Excuse me. Per the Miami Herald's Barry Jackson, participating in OTA sessions after undergoing reconstructive ankle surgery. Jackson did not undergo surgery upon initially injuring his ankle in Week 1 as Miami's starting right tackle attempted to return in Week 12. Jackson played 70 offensive snaps in that December game, but did not suit up again last season. The Dolphins said before the draft they are planning to give Jackson another shot as their top right tackle, though they subsequently passed on his fifth-year option. Now, obviously, we know what they did with the depth. They signed a bunch of tackles with Isaiah Wynn, and I'm forgetting the other guy's name right now, but I do really like Isaiah Wynn, the other former first-round pick from Seattle. Isaiah Wynn actually has talent though, and I think can actually still be a starter in the NFL. He dealt with some injuries last year, but a lot of people have pointed out 2 seasons ago, he was really, really good. So the one thing about Isaiah Wynn that I love is he's actually played a very high level football in his past, and I've said this before, at the very least, this dude's going to be a really good backup tackle. Definitely one of the better ones in the NFL. So it was a phenomenal signing. It's nice to hear Austin Jackson is getting involved in the offseason so early. Excuse me. So that's good. Obviously, getting surgery on that ankle. I'm excited to see what he'll do. I think pretty much the entire community has lost faith in him as a right tackle. So we'll see. He's had a strange career. He's had a new offensive line coach every year he's been in Miami. He's been through 2 head coach changes, or I guess not 2, 1. Excuse me. And he's switched positions multiple times. Obviously played some guard. So he's had a weird career. So I'm interested to see what he does with some continuity under his belt, especially this is his second year in the system. And that hasn't even happened for Tua since he's been a Dolphin. They've had different offensive coordinators every year. So I hope that makes a difference. Now we get into OTAs, which I'm excited to talk about. We're going to go through some of the topics throughout the week that happened, some of the bigger news. And Omar Kelly did a really good article on Sports Illustrated. And these are his 5 observations from Dolphins Week 1 OTAs. And if you guys have read any other articles from the OTAs, this is pretty much what everybody said. These are like the topics that everybody was talking about, at least. I might throw some here and there if that I've noticed as well from some of the clips that I've seen. Players like Braxton Berrios, who looked really good. I thought he looked really, really... I'm very excited to see what he does in this offense, especially after seeing some of that stuff. But so let's get into this. So this is what Omar Kelly saw. And before we get into this, I don't care who's making an article about Dolphins football in the offseason. 90 to 80% of it, and this is no disrespect, I swear to God, and I don't know how other beat writers are treated or how they, maybe media just sucks. But most of the time, these guys get stuff wrong, like pretty much all the time. We could go over how many players were hyped up in the offseason and just did not do jack squat in the regular season. So, obviously take everything with a grain of salt. One thing about Omar Kelly, though, is, he's a skeptic. He's kind of a negative dude, if I'm being honest. But, I think out of all of the people, he's sometimes too negative, but obviously brings it, I think, a different take than some other beat writers do. I do disagree with him a lot, too. He says some weird stuff sometimes. But anyway, these are his observations from OTAs. The first one is Mike, and this is something that a lot of people said that were around the OTAs. Mike White's arm wasn't impressive. This is something Barry Jackson wrote about as well. A lot of Dolphins people saw this. Obviously threw an interception to Javon Holland, I believe, on the first day. Apparently he just did not throw well the first week of OTAs. Makes me a little nervous. This dude's obviously backing up Tua. But one thing I will say is, last year a lot of people thought Teddy Bridgewater looked good in offseason stuff. And we all know, and same thing with Skyler. Skyler was getting praised like he was the second coming. And we all know how that went. It did not go well. So I would say take it with a grain of salt. The stuff that we've seen from Mike White on film, at least, Omar brings up that his arm wasn't impressive. If you guys just go watch the Buffalo game on the road in Buffalo, to me, he has a strong arm. So it was a little surprising to hear that. But, it's definitely something to monitor and definitely makes, I think, everybody pretty nervous because we don't want a repeat of last year. People forget, dude, that team got really injured. And the quarterbacks that came in for Tua played just about as bad as you can. They're lucky that they were playing for a talented, team, or it would have looked even worse because the roster definitely propped them up. But yeah, we need better production from that backup spot, and hopefully this turns around. Especially, we don't want Mike White obviously being bad. You know, I can't deal with another season of, you know, I need a competent backup quarterback. This is something else Omar noticed of the week 1 of Dolphins OTAs. This is something that a lot of different people wrote about. And keep in mind that a lot of the offensive linemen didn't play in some of the starting offensive line, like Terrell Armstead and Connor Williams. They were absent from the practice. So it wasn't, and again, it is t-shirts and shirts. None of this, especially in line play, doesn't matter until pads get put. Honestly, a lot of this doesn't matter until training camp. So again, take it with a grain of salt. But the Dolphins defense got a ton of sacks in the first week of OTAs. Jalen Phillips had a phenomenal first week, apparently. So that's good. Some other people that produced sacks: Cameron Good, Malik Reed, Aubrey Miller, all had sacks in the first week of OTAs. This is something else Omar said. He said inside linebacker needs addressing, and it wasn't because of the performances of the players. It was because of the depth, and he is concerned about the weight and how big some of these linebackers are, and if they'll last an entire season, which is a legitimate concern because of David. Is it David Long? There's too many names in my head. But because of David Long, obviously coming from Tennessee, dealt with a lot of soft tissue injuries. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I really don't. I don't think a lot of these guys, I think you're going to see a pretty nice rotation between the linebackers. I don't think they're going to get pounded all season. You know, when he was in San Francisco, they did play a lot of 2 linebacker sets because they had Patrick Willis, 2 middle linebacker sets because they had Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman. So they were in base defense a lot in that 3-4 when Vic was with the 49ers. But after that, he really didn't do a lot of that. He does play with a lot of defensive backs on the field. So I'm not too worried about the linebacker position. So I disagree. Excuse me. I don't think that's going to really be one of the positions that I would worry about with injuries. Duke Riley has looked good. Who cares? And again, it's t-shirt and shorts. This is literally... You know, one of the things that Omar said, speaking of linebackers, is that he said Elandon Roberts wasn't physical enough. And he's like the most physical player on the defense. I mean, some of the hits that Elandon Roberts had throughout his career as a Dolphin were amazing. Like, I mean, that's the best part of his game, as he was a thumper. So, I don't know, man. Omar said some weird stuff, as I think everybody has if they've covered a team long enough. But, yeah, not really concerned about that. Receivers looked really good. I know that Robbie Anderson, this is something else Omar said, is the receivers looked really good. Braxton Berrios apparently looked good. He even said, he goes on to say that Eric Ezukama looked like an NFL starter, which is really good. Robbie Anderson, I know, caught a couple deep passes. Even Cedric Wilson, Barry Jackson, the Miami Herald, reported in OTAs that Cedric Wilson was playing really good football as well. So that's good. I mean, we know the receiver core is good. And I really like the way Braxton looked in some of those clips that we got to see. He looked really good. And he's going to have a lot of open space in the short to intermediate area in this offense. And I think that's something that the Dolphins need. And he's a really good player in the open field as well, which is good. So I'm really excited to see the receivers. It's arguably the deepest part of the team. And is going to be really fun to watch in preseason as well. Another thing that from a lot of people a lot of the beat writers, including Omar Kelly, that they saw in the week 1 of practices. Again, this is something that he wrote in his article, that speedy tailback creativity and that Devon Achane really impressed with his athletic ability throughout OTAs. So that's good. At least he's impressing people. You know, his first week as a rookie and meaningful offseason stuff, he's impressing people. Even though he's, not in pads yet, not really doing anything that running backs need to do, Tua connected with him on a teardrop pass down the left sideline for 25 yards. So again, and this is something that I noticed when watching him in college. Two things that I think that I think are big deals for A-Chain. Number one, I think Texas A&M used him the completely wrong way. And then number two, I like some of the dumbest play calling for a player like him. And the second thing is, the most impressive thing about him, watching him in college, was he was a really good receiver. He kind of disappointed me after the catch, but in terms of getting open consistently and catching the football, he was really, really good at that. And he has phenomenal speed. So I think getting him in positions where he doesn't have to be overly physical and getting him in open space is what Texas A&M failed to do. I mean, they ran him in between the tackles a lot, which is just not his game. So I would like to see what he looks like when he's given better opportunities as a player, and it's nice to see already in OTAs he's catching some passes. So that's it. That's all that Omar noticed. And obviously I had some other... and he goes on to say, in terms of the running backs, that Savon Ahmed caught a couple passes as well. who's always had a decent... he's always been decent in the passing game. So just to run through it really quickly, the running backs impressed, especially the rookie A-Chain. The receivers look really, really good. It's nice to hear that Eric Azukama is looking better. Jalen Phillips continues to progress, which is good. Mike White looked terrible, apparently, which is not good. That's not good. And that's pretty much it. Shout out to Javon Holland for picking him off, though. So we already know Javon Holland's a great player. I'm excited to see what he does in this defense. So, some of the things that I noticed and from reading is that Braxton Berrios looks really good, and I'm excited to see what he does. Nice to see that Devon A-Chain is impressing people, especially as a third-round pick. That's all you can really ask for. And then, what else am I missing here? Not really anything, but I do think this offense, looking at their roster, is better than it was a year ago, which is kind of wild to say. And I also think the passing game is much better. I like this receiver core better. The running backs I like better. And I like the team a lot better than last year. The defense is better. The coaching on the defense is going to be way better. The depth at corner is way better, which I think is, when you start really thinking about it, obviously hurt the team last year, and it's nice to have it. We still have even, Crossan's coming back too, so the depth there is really nice, and the defensive line is phenomenal. I don't know, out of all the OTA news, the things that at least were weird was the Mike White stuff was weird. That's disappointing to hear, but it is OTAs. It's early on. And then the moved Van Ginkel inside thing is weird. We'll see how that ends up working out. I imagine not very well. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed it. No fan Q&A this week. I forgot to post the video. Or the question, the Q&A. I don't know, the whatever you would call it, for people to post questions. But I really wanted to talk about some of the news that happened, and I hope the Dalvin Cook stuff gets resolved soon. I don't know. It's just weird. It's interesting to see where, obviously, DeAndre Hopkins as well, where he ends up going. I hope it's not in our division. I would rather not have to deal with that. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think about the first week and beyond of OTAs, and I'll see you guys in the next one.